and welcome to this edition of The Debate on France24. I'm Andrea Sankey in Paris. Tonight, 6 health workers imprisoned in Libya for allegedly infecting over 400 children with HIV have been released in Bulgaria. The question tonight, how much reason is there to celebrate? It's undoubtedly the best news friends and family of the 6 could have received, but what does it ultimately mean for the health workers who say they were tortured and lost 8.5 years of their lives wrongfully imprisoned? Also, what does their release mean for Libyan relations with the West? It seems so far Libya is being congratulated for securing their release. The EU has agreed to develop a full partnership with Libya, guaranteeing an aid package to build Libyan healthcare infrastructure. Some say it's a reward Libyans don't quite deserve, while others argue President Muammar Gaddafi should be recognized for winning a tough battle with the victims' families, who were convinced of the health workers' guilt. Well, joining me tonight in the studio to debate those questions and others are Antoine Alexiev, one of the attorneys who represented the health workers in Libya, Jean-Dominique Giuliani, director of the Robert Schuman Foundation, Jean-Pierre Mileli, a Middle East expert and professor from Paris's Political Science University, via satellite from Brussels, Gheorghe Gotev, former editor of the Bulgarian newspaper The Standard, and also via satellite from Brussels, Reed Brody, legal counselor for Human Rights Watch. Thanks all so much for joining us. Let me start to my left here then and ask Antoine, do you feel Libya is being patted on the back now for something it should have done 8 years ago?
Yes, I think that they should have asked at the very beginning of this trial to be helped by the Western and the Occidental people who could have made many things. And I think that many children of those who have died could have been treated before if Libya has asked help for the Occidentals. Now they have had hostages for 8 years and a half. They have tortured them, they have condemned them 3 times to death, and to achieve to some goal that we don't really know which one it is, because it's something internal in Libya, and they have managed to have some agreements among them, but on the sur le compte of some hostages that should never have been there.
Right, and you call them hostages?
Yes, they are hostages. They are absolutely innocent. We know that very well. The epidemic was there before the arrival of the nurses and also of Ashraf, the Palestinian medic. And so these people have nothing to be, there was nothing for condemning them. So I don't understand why all this has happened, because Libya, the first step that it should have done is to come to Occidentals to say, we have such an epidemic and help us.
So what do you make now of this full partnership, this aid package that the EU is now offering to Libya? It seems to many as a reward.
As for me, I think we should say that we have been forced to accept all that. But maybe it's not time to do it. So there are agreements we will go through, and well, very well. But we must remember.
But in a sense, this is almost negotiating with hostage takers.
Yes, of course. But we must remember then that we have been forced for all that.
Right.
We have given them all they wished, because there was 6 people who were in danger of death.
Okay, it turns to my right.
I don't know that Mr. Gaddafi is the winner. We have to wait for the months to come and the years to come and look at what has happened. If Libya could engage negotiation with the European Union to have the benefit of this European neighborhood policy, this is the tool that we have to use at the European level to develop such cooperation, and not to give some railroad, hospital or something like that. We have procedure and we have to respect them. And the only thing that the EU has decided is to open the possibility for Libya to access this kind of procedure. This is the only promise that we made. Not at all, not a reward or something like that, not a payment, and we were forced to open this possibility possibility still open to Morocco, Algeria, and all the countries of the region. And after the 2003 crisis about the nuclear weapon and something like that, other countries like the United States, United Kingdom, have opened the same possibility.
So could the EU then retract this offer that you're calling it?
We have to discuss. We have just accepted to open the discussion.
Mm-hmm. And on what conditions then will this, full partnership be granted?
The condition was what you said. There is an epidemic problem with the AIDS virus, and we have accepted, like other nations, to help them to solve this difficult situation.
Okay, but the truth is Libya has refused to confront and ultimately admit that the reason these children are sick and many are dying now is because it did not investigate its own health, hygiene,
right.
and so it seems unlikely, correct me if I'm wrong, Antoine, that Libya is ready to confront that problem and admit to its public that this was the reason these children are infected. Huh?
I'm not sure that they will admit, but actually they have asked to have a modern hospital for AIDS. So I don't understand how they can explain to have such an hospital if they say they don't have any AIDS.
Well, they can simply claim they're upgrading their systems, which any responsible authority would do, in any case.
Yes, if they have asked for that, we have given it to them.
Yeah.
We have to keep in mind that we are with a dictatorship, and a dictatorship is weak in front of its own people. And we have to throw some light about on the Libyan regime. It was such a scandal to have to admit that those children were dead because of the regime, that Muammar Gaddafi entered in all that affair. And the main reason was, in my view, to derive the domestic attention toward foreigners, which is very easy but not so uncommon in Libya. And the nurses and the doctor were ideal scapegoats in that view. And after, to make a great gains with those hostages.
Mm-hmm. Let me bring in our guest now via satellite. Reed Brody, if your line is still up, or am I hearing? We don't have Reed Brody. Georgi Gotev, your take on this then, is a dictator perhaps being rewarded now?
Well, I think that it's very important to say and to repeat that Libya is not a normal country. It's not a democratic country, and parallel realities are possible there. So if the Libyan regime wants to say to their people, it has been a terrible plot against our people, but we have found an agreement and now they can go, it's perfect with them. So the truth has no incidence in Libya, unfortunately. And second thing, which is very important, I think that we must keep in mind that Libya is an oil-rich country, and the Western countries sometimes are looking the other way and forgetting what kind of dictatorship it is and what kind of terrorist attacks have been organized by Libya in the past. So one may say, I can accept that Libya was rewarded, and Libya will be even more rewarded when new contracts are going to be concluded for the exploration of petrol or for sales of armament. Yes, this will be Gaddafi's reward.
Okay, what about justice then for the 6 people who were wrongfully imprisoned and tortured? You can justify what Gaddafi is doing all you want, but what about the real victims here?
I think we all tried to have a pragmatic solution to the problem. An ideal solution was not possible, and the best news are that the 6 medics are in Bulgaria and they are free. This is the best part of the story. Yes, it was extortion. Yes, it was ransom. Yes, probably Gaddafi paid himself this money because he needed to come out from this situation. He needed to bribe the families so that they would agree for the medics to go. Everything is true. Maybe he was seeking revenge against the Lockerbie case. Maybe he felt that his arms were twisted during the Lockerbie case, and it was a perfect occasion for him to have his revenge. Everything is probably true. But the most important thing is that the international community has found a solution to the problem, and the medics are free. I'm Bulgarian, and I must say that this is very important for the Bulgarians to understand what European solidarity means and what citizenship in the European Union means, because in fact Bulgaria has become member of the European Union since January 1st, and since then we knew that a solution will be found, and the solution has been found. It's a very important message. It's a lesson to be learned also by other countries what European citizenship means.
Okay. Let me go back to Jean-Dominique here and ask then ultimately what does the release and freedom now of these 6 health workers really equate to in terms of Libya's relations with the EU and the West?
Only the opening of a new phase of relationship. We have accepted to open discussion to give access to Libya to the European neighborhood policy. Like Moldavia, Russia, and some other country, including in the Maghreb region. This is the only thing we have agreed.
But again, it does seem a reward.
Yes,
what everyone seems to agree on this panel was basically extortion and bribery.
Yes, it is.
And
yes,
a long-term
yes,
reward. Why?
Yes, it
Why?
is.
Who learns a lesson from this? This situation essentially could happen again in Libya. Innocent people, Westerners or otherwise, could be imprisoned under their system that has not been corrected as a result of this case.
Every government in the same situation is confronted to the same equation. Look at what the Americans, the Brits, or some other did for to have their hostages back. They do the same. And this is on the table. We have to conduct this discussion on a transparent way. There is no reward paid in the back or under the table or something like that. This is only the opening of something normal. Yes, Mr. Gaddafi is a dictator. Yes.
He's a dictator that has also been called a terrorist many times in the past.
Yes.
And EU policy has always said we don't negotiate with hostage takers or terrorists. But essentially you're saying we do.
And what did the American with the Iranian? They discussed with the Iranian. This is the new world. We have to do that, and we have to keep our principle on the table and not to deal with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Of course.
I would like to add something. In fact, yes, I think that the West can discuss with all rich terrorists. But let's also remember that Gaddafi has been used as an intermediary in a series of situations where Western hostages were taken elsewhere in the world, and the broker for freeing the hostages has always been Gaddafi. And the Western countries were paying some money to Libya, and Libya was paying money to the hostages. In terms of hostage taking, I think Gaddafi is the world champion.
Okay. About 30 seconds left. Final comments, Pierre or Antoine?
Yes, when they're hostages and when their life is in danger, you can't either go with an army or discuss. Mm-hmm. There is not a third way, and we were obliged to discuss with Gaddafi.
Okay. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to interrupt us all there because we're out of time, but just for this half of the debate, we're going to return after 12 minutes. Short break now for news and weather. We'll be back after that time. More on this discussion. Do stay with us. Welcome back to this edition of the debate on France24. I'm Andrea Sankey in Paris, and tonight we've been discussing the aftermath and possible repercussions involving the release of 6 Bulgarian health workers sentenced to death in Libya for allegedly infecting hundreds of children with the HIV virus. Now, we will continue our discussion on that in just a minute, but it's important to bring up that there's another issue brewing in all this. The fact that some say France has stolen the EU's thunder for securing the release of these 6 men and women. French President Nicolas Sarkozy had made seeing to their freedom a campaign promise, and France's First Lady was sent twice to meet the affected children's families, government members, and the health workers themselves. So, another question we're asking, does France deserve credit for their release? Well, joining me again to discuss that issue and others, Antoine Alexiev, one of the attorneys who represented the health workers in Libya, Jean-Dominique Giuliani, director of the Robert Schuman Foundation, Jean-Pierre Mileli, a Middle East expert and professor from Paris's Political Science University. Via satellite from Brussels, Georgi Gotev, former editor of the Bulgarian newspaper The Standard, and also via satellite from Brussels, Reed Brody, legal counselor for Human Rights Watch. Reed, so glad we have your satellite back for this half of the debate, so I'll actually get your insight now on what you make of the perception that Libya is actually being rewarded for something that should have happened 8 years ago, before 6 innocent health workers were made to suffer, imprisoned wrongfully for 8.5 years, and tortured, as they claim. What do you make of the fact that it seems a dictator is being rewarded?
Well, you know, I think this case was in fact, what was holding up normalization, and I think it's great that Libya is coming in from the cold, but this case was only the most prominent of many cases that exist in Libya. The leading dissidents in Libya are in prison. There is no freedom of the press. There are no political parties. Criticism of the Colonel Gaddafi and the Green Book are still punishable by up to death. So normalized relations, yes, but not at the expense of human rights. And I think the European Union now has to demand of Libya that it clean up its act, that the justice system be improved. And frankly, the things that allowed the AIDS epidemic to fester are also related to a lack of freedom of speech, a lack of freedom, and these have to be addressed as well.
Is a dangerous precedent being set, though, right now, merely by the fact that the EU is touting this, full partnership that it's working on with Libya and helping to develop, or actually giving funds to develop its own healthcare infrastructure, when it still hasn't been acknowledged, Libya still hasn't acknowledged that the government and its failure to invest in its own healthcare system is actually responsible for these over 400 children's illness and dozens of deaths?
Well, that's another good point. I mean, Libya needs to address the AIDS epidemic. It needs to stop the stigmatization of people with HIV. But I would turn it around. I would say that had this not happened, relations would have already been normalized. And if Libya were to arrest foreigners, hostages, as they were rightly called, again, I think it would be a step back. So this is, as people said, this is what happens when hostages are taken. Libya should not be rewarded. It should not get a free pass on all these other issues. So
last question then quickly for you. What would you like to see the EU do in response to this case?
Well, I think, helping deal with the AIDS epidemic is a very positive thing. Helping deal with the healthcare system is a very positive thing, not for the government, but for the people of Libya. But it would also be a positive thing if the EU would insist on return to the rule of law, on judicial reform, on the release of leading dissidents.
Okay. Did you want a quick comment? Or?
Yes, I totally agree with that, because this is the rule of the European Union. It's impossible to have some concrete project or funding without a debate and some engagement on the rule of law, the judicial process. For example, we have suspended our agreement with Russia for this reason.
Okay. Let's move on now to the other issue at hand here, which is the fact that many are seemingly complaining about France stealing the thunder of the European Union and its efforts to secure the release of these 6 prisoners. Let's listen now to President Sarkozy's own response to that criticism and hear what he had to say.
I've heard the remarks of other people on this case, notably those of ministers for 2 years and a half. But if they had good ideas, they shouldn't have been shy in coming forward. In any case, I said it during my electoral campaign, and I said it again on the night I was elected. These nurses, to my heart, were French, not in the legal sense, but French because they had been unjustly accused and were suffering, and because we had to get them out of there. So once you decide that, we just had to solve the problem, and that's that. We don't need a big discussion about the new role of French diplomacy. We don't need a discussion about the status of the French head of state's spouse. We had to get them out, we got them out, and that's what counts.
Il fallait les faire sortir, on les a fait sortir, et c'est ça qui compte.
We had to get them out, we got them out, and that's what counts. So let me ask, Georgi, what is the perception in Bulgaria as to who was actually responsible for the freedom of these health workers?
I think most of the Bulgarians will say it's Nicolas Sarkozy and Cecilia Sarkozy. Some Bulgarians even ask today for a big boulevard to be named after them. And I think the PR of Mr. Sarkozy is excellent. And I was today in the European Commission, and I felt a feeling of frustration because Madame Ferrero-Waldner, the Commissioner for Foreign Affairs from Austria, was instrumental for a very long time, but she almost appeared as invisible in the whole picture. Having said that, I must say that the French civil society did the most, because in order to have this pressure on the governments, in order to have Mr. Sarkozy to decide to make of this subject one of his very important subjects of his election campaign, I think this was because of the public opinion. And the public opinion in France was very strongly mobilized for the freedom of the medics. Thousands of signatures were gathered. A lot of meetings took place, and this is what makes the governments move. I think France has to be singled out in this direction.
Okay. Pierre, let me ask you, is France to thank for this, or did Sarkozy simply carry off the back of long-term EU efforts?
I think we shouldn't be naive with Gaddafi, but we shouldn't be naive too with Sarkozy. And we have to remember that the subject appeared suddenly in the night of the elections in the president's speech. And in my view, there was the prospect of an agreement before, of course, that it mentioned in his speech. And the fact also that the Qatar was a go-between in the affair, and that the Emir of Qatar was the guest of the 14th of July military parade is also to be taken into account. And I think it's rather risky to play this kind of game, either in Europe or in the Arab country. I want to add something about Qatar, for example, because Qatar is the rival of Saudi Arabia. And the fact that Qatar was the guest and that Qatar played a role in this affair, seemingly, would maybe hurt the Saudians, as well as we saw 2 weeks ago that the first voyage of the president in Algeria hurted the Moroccans. So we have to be, we don't have to be naive, but we have to be very, very sensitive to the implications of that kind of flashy diplomacy.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, just one point from the European level. I am French also, and I do think that Sarkozy has changed the course of the negotiation, because it's impossible at the European level to conduct a real foreign affairs policy without the support of the bigger states like France, Germany, United Kingdom. It's impossible to have their own foreign affairs policy, and the proof is that the new treaty that we are negotiating cancel the function of Madame Benita Ferrero-Waldner and merge this function with the Solana function. We need to have a foreign affairs minister depending from the nation states to have the support and the weight of the nation state. And what Sarkozy did
assumed
is
that
to
role.
give the weight of the French diplomacy to the European efforts.
Okay. Antoine, do you think Sarkozy should be proud of having then negotiated with these hostage takers and playing into this political game that Pierre was referring to?
I'm not sure that this question is relevant because now everybody's talking about the success of France. It's a very interesting success because it is a whole team who managed to have this agreement and the extradition. So it's not only Sarkozy, it was also Ferrero-Waldner and all the work that has been done before. It's very pity to focus only on Sarkozy. The main point was to have these people freed, and we have them freed. So now this is what was the first step to have. After, what is very interesting to see to make the theory of the practice of Sarkozy, because it was very, c'était très imaginatif. He made several things that nobody expected. Mm-hmm. He sent his own wife without any mandate. Mm-hmm. There was Guillaume who was there, but he was a little bit under the orders of the First Lady. It's very special, and it's very interesting to see that this has run, and why. So this would be a good subject.
Mm-hmm. And very efficient, too.
Efficient, yes.
Right. Reid, let me get your take on that. I mean, do you commend the EU and France's efforts specifically in securing the release of these hostages? Does it meet with human rights standards?
Well, you know, when you're talking about people's lives, I think you have to do what they did. These medics were hostages. Their lives were a nightmare. They had been tortured. I think it certainly behooved the European Union, whether or not they were European Union citizens, to try to get them out. I think obviously there are prices that one cannot pay, and it's very important that the EU insist that Libya comply with human rights down the line, and that the price of this not be a blank check for Libya. But yes, I think it's very important that the EU and France were able to get these people out.
Okay. At this, did you have a comment, Antoine?
Yes, what I would like to add, just to finish that, is that it's not so difficult to have a discussion with Libya or with anyone else. What is very difficult is to get off of the negotiation, to reach to the end of the negotiation, and the last steps are the most difficult to achieve. And I don't know, we can't do the story again, but I don't know who could have the same solution and the conclusion than Sarkozy, Cecilia, Ferrero-Waldner, and all these people. The last steps are the most difficult in a negotiation, and they did it. This is the most important.
Okay, and so they should be congratulated for those efforts.
No, they made their job. They made what
they did their jobs.
What had to be done.
Okay. At this point, I'd like to actually bring in some of our viewers' comments, and one of our viewers actually wrote with a rather strong criticism. Let's see if we can get that graphic up. Our government leaders should have put much more pressure on Gaddafi much earlier to resolve the medics' plight. The appearance was of wait and see, very much of wait and see in the end. Obviously, the viewer finds this approach rather detrimental, that Sarkozy's efforts, EU's efforts, came too late. Does anybody agree that that was the case, that this simply should have been done sooner and that the congratulations should be held back to an extent?
I don't think we have to make the story again, but at first, in the first times, the Bulgaria was confronted to Libya, and they very slowly came to Western people and the countries to help, to ask for help. Okay. So the things came very slowly, and when it came as it came. So now don't do the story again. Okay.
Georgi, let me just get final comments from you then, and assess for us the situation in Bulgaria from a personal perspective. How much does this mean to the country, what they perceive, that what France has done?
It was a day of celebration, you can imagine that. And I think, of course, that we will make the same analysis as we are doing now, internally also. But I think, speaking about Europe, that Europe has been lacking leadership, I think, in the last years. And If Sarkozy can bring some leadership, then it's perfect. Well, probably there will be some frustrations, but this is the clear example to follow. Europe has to be a very strong entity.
Okay, Georgi, I'm going to have to end it there because we are completely out of time for this edition of the debate. I'd like to thank you so much for joining us, Georgi Gotev, former editor of the Bulgarian newspaper The Standard. Also joining us via satellite from Brussels, Reid Brody, legal counselor for Human Rights Watch. Thank you as well. In the studio, Antoine Alexiev, one of the attorneys who represented the health workers in Libya, Jean-Dominique Giuliani, director of the Robert Schuman Foundation, and Jean-Pierre Millet, a Middle East expert and professor from Paris's Political Sciences University. Thank you all so much for joining us, and thanks to our audience as well. That's all for this edition. Bonsoir.